First item on the agenda will be Senate Bill 617. Council will explain the bill in lieu of having it read.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Senate Bill 617 would require all full-time and part-time salaried and hourly officials, officers, and employees of the state institutions of higher education and the Higher Education Policy Commission be paid on a semi-monthly basis. Under the current law, employees are required to be paid at least twice per month. And this code section, which is Chapter 6, Article 7, Section 1, is also provides that nothing contained in this section is intended to increase or diminish the salary or wages of any official, officer, or employee. That twice per month and the provision that nothing in the section is intended to increase or diminish the salaries is significant. That is exactly all that the bill does. However, that language, it is significant in regards to the issue at which the bill seeks to address, that issue being the transition of a number of large amount of the state employees' pay from a semi-monthly basis to a bi-weekly basis. And just to be clear, semi-monthly, the 15th and the 30th, bi-weekly, every other Friday. A plan was adopted and enacted to switch all state employees to bi-weekly pay as part of the state's implementation of the Integrated Enterprise Resource Planning System that we all know as OASIS. This implementation, and thus the decision to transition the pay schedule, is overseen by the Enterprise Resource Planning Board, the ERP Board, which is made up of the governor, the treasurer, and the auditor. This transition to bi-weekly pay was planned to be implemented in two separate waves. Wave 1 agencies implemented bi-weekly pay on May 16th of 2015, and that included a number of agencies, including the governor's office, the auditor's office, treasurer's office, Department of Agriculture, Department of Administration, and a few others. All other agencies that were not included in Wave 1 were intended to transition to bi-weekly pay as part of Wave 2 on November 14th, 2015. However, following the Wave 1 implementation, there were a significant amount of concerns raised regarding the transition, and these revolved primarily around what I think could be classified as potential unintended consequences financially, which I'll outline here in just a moment. However, it was Monday, November 2nd, 2015. This was prior to Wave 2 being planned to be implemented. The ERP board voted to postpone the Wave 2 implementation. Therefore, we are in a current state of having the Wave 1 already be implemented, but Wave 2 has been indefinitely put on hold. Now, the financial concerns with this implementation are best outlined. There was a fiscal note prepared for this bill by the Legislative Auditor's Office. There is also a table of figures which you all should have in front of you that pretty clearly outlines these financial costs. But to overview the fiscal note, it estimated the actual implementation of this Senate Bill 617 would save the state between $59,438,784 and $61,620,000. And again, that's money that the state is estimated to save by adopting the bill, and thus canceling the implementation of biweekly pay and rolling back the wave one people who have already been implemented. The fiscal note states that the full implementation of biweekly pay will result in a total cost of $69,600,000 due to the following unintended and unfunded consequences. First, it's contended that there would be an immediate $22.5 million unfunded liability for the Consolidated Public Retirement Board. And the reason for this being is that, and this was, I believe, part of an actuarial analysis done by the CPRB. But again, the reason for that is because under the retirement plans are based off a 36-month pay period. And under the bi-weekly pay plan, there would be some employees who would have a 79 pay periods during a 36-month period, which would, what that means is ultimately their retirement benefits would increase. Returning to semi-monthly pay would eliminate this immediate $22.5 million liability for retirees. And secondly, we would be looking at a $47.1 million increase, a cost due to increased salaries for 24,607 salaried state employees over, and this would be over a 10-year period. That amount is also based off the whole 36-month pay period issue. There's some very intricate rounding mathematical issues that apparently result in that. Now that is, again, only affects the salaried employees, would not affect the hourly employees. The fiscal note does say that it's been projected or estimated by the project director of the ERP board that halting the conversion to biweekly pay and returning the agencies who have already gone through the wave one adoption would result in a one-time cost of between $7,980,000 and $10,161,216. That one-time cost, as estimated by the ERP board, would be the cost would be to convert the OASIS system to semi-monthly pay. But there would be no further cost to state following the conversion. The fiscal note contends that that those cost estimates which would in effect that would be the cost of adopting the Senate Bill 617 would have been proposed by the ERP, but the Legislative Auditor's Office, who prepared the fiscal note, has not verified that the reasoning or why that cost would be such a high cost. But if you look at the handout, even if you take into account that cost, the estimated savings for adopting the Senate bill would be between $59.4 million and $61.6 million. There is a proposed committee substitute, but that only makes technical corrections to the bill that need to be addressed. And Mr. Chairman, the bill is single reference to your Committee on Government Organization.
Thank you. We're going to forego questions of council right now so that we can get all the information before us, then we'll be able to bring people up and down and ask the questions accordingly. The next person that I'd like to bring up here, since they did it, was the Legislative Auditor, and come up and explain what's going on here. And also, I think they're familiar with the chart that council was talking about. You might want to go into a little bit more detail on helping us understand what that chart of numbers mean. Please, yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Aaron Allred. I'm the Legislative Manager, and as part of that duty, I'm also the Legislative Auditor. You want me to walk through the chart, or you want me to walk through or answer questions?
Yeah,
Whatever pleases the chair. Walk through the chart.
Yes.
Okay, if you look at the cost of converting to biweekly pay, you'll see the first cost is that there's an immediate $22.5 million unfunded liability which occurs in the Consolidated Public Retirement Board for the PERS retirement system. The reason for this is because the way the statute for retirement is written, the way to understand it is the Consolidated Public Retirement Board is to be liberal in how they view the retirement calculations for state employees. When you convert to a biweekly payroll system, the initial problem is there's 52 weeks in the year, but there's 365 or 366 days in the year. 52 does not evenly divide into 7 into 365 or 366. So over a 3-year period, you can take any 36-month period and force 79 pay periods into that, as opposed to the present system where you get 36 months of pay. Under biweekly, when they calculate retirement, you'll actually get more than what you earned in 36 months. You would get what you were paid in 36 months, which is not the same thing. This is not $22.5 million over time. According to the CPRB actuary, this is the present value of the cost of converting to biweekly. That to fund the system correctly, the conversion to biweekly should have resulted in an immediate $22.5 million payment to the PERS system. Second, because 365 or 366 in a leap year is not evenly divisible by 7, what happens is you get, in most years, 1 extra day, and in some leap years, 2 extra work days. You get paid for that. It may be accrued, but it's a real cost to the state. If you understand the way biweekly is, at some point, there will be 27 pay periods in a year that the state's going to have to come up with that extra pay period in the budget. That's not the only cost. It's not that you can just kick this can down the road. People's average hourly earnings go up the way the ERP board has calculated biweekly pay. Not by much, but when you're talking about 365 or 366 days, and when you're talking about the size of payroll that the state has, which if I remember right off the top of my head is approximately $1.8 billion, that decimal, which they are not using, is the equivalent of additional $4.7 million a year in additional wages for salaried employees. Now, hourly employees get no additional pay by going to biweekly, because the conversion for hourly employees was no conversion. It was just, this is your hourly wage, and that's what you get paid for every day, every hour you work. You take my salary, for example, I think I get an extra $560 extra every year through biweekly pay. Over 10 years, that's about $47.1 million by my CPA's calculations throughout the system. So one, I think it's unfair to hourly employees because they wouldn't get a raise. Salaried employees would. And in addition, it's a significant sum of money to the state. And you'll get paid that extra money when you leave the system. It doesn't just occur in the year that the 27th pay period's in. When you leave the system through retirement, you're going to get paid for every day you worked. These are real numbers. It's an additional $4.7 million a year approximately, which is why we proposed to the Post-Audit Subcommittee of the Joint Committee that this bill be introduced. One other thing I would point out, we're using the numbers provided to us with regards to the cost from the executive branch. When the initial discussions were over using the appropriate decimal points like other states use to calculate biweekly pay correctly, we were originally told that the cost would be $4 million. They then lowered that cost to being $60,000 in additional programming to use the decimal. So I'm not going to stand here and tell you with certainty that the cost they are proposing to fix the system to go back to semi-monthly is in fact what the total cost would be. It might very well be lower.
Are you complete?
Yes, sir.
All right, don't run off, but we're going to bring somebody else up. Again, I'm doing this a little bit different from in the past so that we get all the information, and we're running late in the evening, so that's the logic behind what I'm doing here. Today, we all received in the legislature, members of the legislature, a letter from the Supreme Court, and I believe Steve Canterbury's in the audience. And would you approach and give us your perspective and your thoughts and elaborate on the letter?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thanks for the opportunity. This will be very brief. Not quite as brief as the letter, but pretty brief. The court has endorsed this legislation. It is very rare that the court ever endorses any legislation. I've been there now coming on 11 years. I think this is the 5th piece of legislation in all that time that has been endorsed. Some laws are too obvious to be written. One that we have in West Virginia is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We didn't see anything wrong with the semi-monthly pay periods. There are, however, written parts of the code which just seem to have been ignored. Throughout, our 278 elected officials are to be paid annually. This biweekly stuff doesn't really work out without some extraordinary bookkeeping. Also, annual salaries are to be paid to magistrate staff and clerks and family court staff. The code mandates that probation officers be paid semi-monthly. The code also mandates the office of clerk be paid at the direction of the Supreme Court. And furthermore, in a very strange piece of code, that it says that family court staff is to be paid at my order. Strangely enough, I haven't issued that order since I've been to my job. It's just been going like clockwork. Most of what Mr. Allred said has been very impressive to the court. Everyone who's seen his work truly admires Aaron Allred and his staff and understands that they have the highest quality and do extraordinary work. Perhaps, however, these pieces of code wouldn't have been missed if the judicial branch had been invited to be part of the ERP board. We were left out. An entire branch of government was left out. We were never consulted. We never had any part of this. And so it made it kind of catch up for us just to know what was going on. We feel that this is a Procrustean system, that we've had to cut this and cut that to try to make it fit the square. And I think that, again, I think the court members were more impressed with what they'd read in reports from Aaron Allred's post-audit work and his reports to you than they have been any other part of what they've seen on this. That's why they were moved to get involved. I can answer any questions. I could tell you about details of payroll. Talk to the payroll clerks in any of the offices in state government. And you're going to find that where they used to take 2 hours to do changes in the EPIC system, it's taken them 8 hours to do those same changes. And that happens with almost every pay period. There's something changing. Somebody changed something. And you have to go through remarkable amounts of trouble. If technology is supposed to make the flow better, then that hasn't really succeeded here. We're not part of Kronos because we had too many different variables, I suspect. We did try, but we've had to purchase our own system to keep track of this. That system's geared towards what the code currently says on annual and semi-monthly, et cetera. So for all those reasons, and if there are any questions, I'll try to answer them. But that's it in a nutshell. I know this has been a long day, and I didn't want to make it too long.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'm going to pause you for just a minute. I'm
Sure.
certain you're going to get called back.
I'm here.
Trying to get all sides up, and then we're going to come back to you, please.
Okay,
Thank you.
I'm here. Thank you.
Next one on the agenda, I believe, will be our State Auditor, Glen Gainer. Would you please come and share with us your knowledge?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm not sure where to begin, not having the opportunity to look at the physical note that's been provided. I would, however, point out that the CPRB issue is something that the administration and the executive branch was well aware of and is prepared and has legislation that would correct that and remove that to a de minimis cost. It is just a matter of changing the statute to coincide with a biweekly pay system. The issue on the payment and the $47 million, I might say when we made the decision to move to biweekly pay, it was something that the ERP board, which is the governor, the treasurer, and myself, we first voted to stay semi-monthly. That was over 3 years ago. However, part of this project was the formation by the legislature of a steering committee that was to advise us as the enterprise-wide board. That committee had representation from this body and from the House. And it was that body that came to us as a board asking us to reconsider our position and move the state to biweekly pay. In fact, the Senate's representative is the one that made the motion at the steering committee, encouraging us, imploring us to reconsider our action. Why do we do biweekly pay? Biweekly pay is the way that over 72% of all large employers in this country pay their employees. It is the most efficient, it's the most cost-effective, and the most accurate way in which processing large volumes of pay. West Virginia's payroll system, I would stand to say that us, along with about 10 other states that pay all their employees, all public employees in a single payroll system, is the most complex payroll system in the country, outside of the federal government. It is an extremely complex system because we pay everything from physicians to ditch diggers and every classification in between. So it is an extremely complex system. Making any change to the system the way that it has been designed, and keep in mind, this work has been going on now for 3 years. So we're going to have to unwind a clock that we've been winding for 3 years. And this is not as easy as flipping a switch. It's going to cost us thousands of hours and millions of dollars. Now, it was raised that in a biweekly system, the premise is you pay every employee for every day and every hour worked. I stand by that premise. I believe that's what's appropriate. I think we should pay employees for every day and every hour worked. That was the decision that the executive branch made. Now, it was brought to our attention in the legislature, or the legislative auditor did his managerial report, as I like to call it. I don't view it as an audit. Said that we should have used a decimal point. We have had the system programmed to use a decimal point. There was a statement made that that's the way other states do. 2 other states do it that way. They use a decimal point. All the other states, I'll look to our neighbor right across the border in Ohio. They pay biweekly. They pay 99% of their employees biweekly. And they do pay them that 27th pay when it comes due. Now, they do not pay their court biweekly, and we can make that exception and pay the court monthly if that's what they desire. But it is wrong for the state to return the course. We talk about changing our direction and operating more efficiently and operating as the private sector does. That's what an enterprise-wide system is all about. And that's why the state has invested the millions of dollars to bring about the accountability and a system that gives us greater flexibility and greater accountability for the spending of taxpayer dollars. That's why we did it. That's why we are one of the last states to adopt that technology. But we want to stay 49th or 50th. This system moves us ahead and takes us where we need to go. I support the biweekly system. And I will just say in closing, and I'll be glad to answer any questions, but I'll say in closing, I really don't have a dog in this fight. Because by the time that this would come about and this change would be, I'll be retired. But I do say this, it will be the wrong decision for the state to move back to semi-monthly. What was not mentioned in that fiscal note is the estimated of $8 million annually in payroll errors by paying semi-monthly. Over the course of 11 years, that's $88 million in payroll errors, and that's been documented through legislative audits. So it is a costly system, but we could implement that decimal point, or the most simple fix, if we're concerned about that 27th pay, in 2020, which is the first time, according to our schedule, that employees would receive 27 pays in a calendar year, we can divide by 27 that calendar year and pay them just their annualized salary for that year. However, it will not, that 27th pay is not a budgetary issue until 2023. So, we're here to serve and do what is asked upon us. I just tell you that I believe moving away from biweekly pay would be the wrong decision for the state of West Virginia and cause us to undo 3 years worth of work. Thank you.
Thank you. Governor's office, does somebody hear from the governor's office? Really? Nobody's here from the governor's office. Interesting. Okay, committee. Anybody can punch in and ask questions of anybody that's spoken, and have them come forward, waiting for the lights to light up.
How about bringing the air forward?
Senator from Raleigh, just speak who you'd like to have come up,
Aaron.
and they can hear you, and we'll work it from there.
Hey, Aaron.
How are you, Senator?
Doing good, doing good. The wave of employees that's already switched to the biweekly pay.
Yes, sir.
About how many employees is that?
I believe it's approximately 10,000.
Around 10,000. And prior to switching to the biweekly, they were semi-monthly before through Oasis system, correct?
Through Epics.
Epics, okay. And I see some of these figures to switch them from biweekly back to semi-monthly, and it's kind of astonishing to me because, I do payroll and handle payroll for a lot of different companies and have different pay rates by class code, by semi-monthly, weekly, bi-weekly, you name it, we do it. And to switch somebody from one pay cycle to another, these are it's pretty expensive, $7,900 or $7,900,000 to $10 million to do that. When, in my opinion, that should be more or less just a click of a button and a roll down. So, are these figures pretty accurate? Or did you get those from the consulting company?
We got those from Mr. Childers, who's the agency director for the ERP board.
Okay.
As I said previously, when we started this discussion with them, and we're dealing with the decimal point, we were told it was going to be $4 million to divide by the decimal point. That ended up being worked down to 60,000. So I'm not going to stand here and tell you that those numbers are not higher than what actually it would cost. I'm not sure.
And when you did the audit, did you talk to a lot of payroll clerks in different divisions about the system and how it works and the flow of it and how it streamlined things or didn't streamline things? Did you have any conversations with any of those people?
No, sir. The state auditor was absolutely correct when he said this was not an audit. This was an analysis. It's not the same thing.
So you don't know if this system has helped streamline things or not?
I can only speak from my agency, which is the largest of the three parts of the legislature. In some ways it has, in some ways it is not. I do not believe it has in payroll. There are problems. For example, if this was going to be done with biweekly, there needed to be a global review of the statute, which was not done. I constantly have problems with regards with if I get someone that's in wave one that comes works for us and getting their leave to transfer correctly, because the way the statute reads with regards to state employees' leave is that leave is earned on a monthly basis. Therefore, if you've only got 28 days in a month, you now have to make a calculation as to how much additional leave should they have earned for that month that's presently not programmed into the system when we transfer them into us when we're a Wave 2 agency.
So I guess a lot of the flaws and errors that you're having is due to the software, basically.
I think it's a combination of the software, though my understanding from Kronos is, like you said, the Kronos system, I was told by someone from Kronos, is merely a checkbox,
Yeah.
whether it's semi-monthly, whether it's monthly, whether it's weekly or bi-weekly, that the Kronos system is that simple. I think probably Mr. Childers, who's the head of the ERP board, could speak more as to the integration between Kronos and the CGI software.
Okay. And just getting back to the conversion of, semi-monthly to bi-weekly. If you take a person that's making $60,000 a year, and whether you break it out semi-monthly or bi-weekly, at the end of the year, he's getting a W-2 for $60,000.
That is not if you divide correctly, sir.
Say it again?
Not if you divide correctly, because there's 365 days, 3 years, and 366 the fourth year. In most years, on average, there's approximately 261 days in a year. So if you divide their annual salary by 261 instead of 260, like the law actually requires,
Okay.
the person payroll, their W-2 actually would show 59.7 or 59.8. It wouldn't show 60.
Well, if I put it in my system, I say I'm gonna pay you $60,000, and it's semi-monthly or bi-weekly, at the end of that year, he's getting a W-2 for $60,000. The system will calculate it out correctly.
Not the way this is done, and I go to the governor's salary. I actually received a phone call in July about the governor's salary. How could they force the governor's salary through with biweekly so that they didn't overpay him? The governor's salary is set in code. And the way it would have worked, according to the governor's office, was if they didn't make an adjustment, they would have overpaid the governor more than what the statute allowed him to be paid. So they had to make an adjustment to the system to get the governor's pay correctly under biweekly pay.
Again, I think that goes back to a system error more so than anything. Okay. Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Senator from Putnam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there someone here that designed this system that is on the software side of this that can speak to the Senator from Raleigh's questions, that has that expertise? All right. I tried, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Further questions? Senator from Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Aaron, I'm sorry to make you be like a jack-in-the-box. Would you mind coming back real quick? And I'm just processing and analyzing what you were indicating to us just a minute ago, and something that didn't ring true. Am I understanding you correct when you stated that the 3 years were on a 260-day pay period, and then on the fourth year we're 261 or something to that effect?
No, actually, the average is right at just a little under 261. It depends on a couple things. If the year starts on a Saturday, that changes how many work days there are in a year.
Okay, but why I'm asking this question, and I'm following up with what the senator from Raleigh was getting at. I've worked in industry for years. When I negotiate my salary based on an annual basis. Regardless of the number of days I work, if I negotiate a salary, I'm paid a salary for the year.
Yes, sir.
Regardless of the number of days. So is the system set up that rather than calculating based on an annual basis, figuring that out through the course of the year, that it's recalculated, it takes that, if I'm paid $100,000 a year, it's taking that $100,000 a year salary and dividing it by the number of days within the year and putting it within the appropriate pay period?
If you would use the decimal like more than 2 states do, yes, sir. You have to take the salary if you are going to pay correctly. Because remember, pay is accrued. We may pay you 26 paychecks, but pay is actually accrued. Okay, so 26 paychecks equals 260 workdays.
Understood.
In most years, they're 261 workdays. So you actually are supposed to divide by the number of workdays in the year. For example, if you go to the Comptroller of Maryland's website, one of the questions on the website is, why doesn't my W-2 equal my salary? And it explains, because of the number of workdays in the year, they divide by 261 in those years that there are 261 workdays. They divide by 262 in those years where there's 262 workdays. And once in a while, there are 260 workdays, in which case it works out perfectly to be the equivalent of 26 paychecks. Now, if you're going to ensure, if what you're going to do is pay everyone their annual salary over 26 paychecks,
Right.
and you're going to ensure that state employees don't get overpaid.
Right.
Because the law did not allow that this change would result in any increase in pay.
Right. I
Then
understand.
at the end of someone's employment, you've got to go back, you would have to go back for each employee and capture those extra days they've got from all those years when there were 261 work days as opposed to 260 as biweekly is based upon.
Okay, and I get your rationale. I don't necessarily agree with it, but because of the system that we have with us, I understand what you're trying to convey. Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, I'm going to have at it for a few minutes, if you don't mind. Leave the committee. Since there's nobody here from the governor's office, would the state auditor come and answer some questions for me, please? And I'm sorry that I apologize on behalf of the governor's office that you're here to defend it, because if you said earlier, there's a group of 3. Mr. Canterbury from the Supreme Court mentioned that they were excluded out of it. You were within that group of 3 that made tell us about that again, so I get it right, because I forget the acronyms and all that.
Yeah. When the legislation was established, and keep in mind part of the OASIS project was bringing the 3 constitutional officers that have responsibility in the payment of state dollars, utilizing a single system. Prior to OASIS, I operated my own mainframe system, kept my own set of accounting records. The governor and the Department of Administration had a like system, and we had to keep those 2 systems in sync. So what we did when we created the board is saying we're going to shutter our 2 systems in the sake of saving money, operating more efficiently, and bringing that operation together in a single computer platform. The only way to ensure and maintain the constitutional duties and the separation within the constitutional duties of the governor, auditor, and treasurer was the formation of a board where we had to operate in a unanimous environment so that the constitutional duties and responsibilities of the 3 could not be trampled on by 1 or 2 of the others. And so that's why the board was set of the 3 officers that have that responsibility under the law. Then the legislature also in that legislation created an advisory board to us, representing a broad spectrum of state government. And included in that were representatives of the legislature.
Who else?
The court was not intentionally excluded in any way, and I, all meetings were always open and always published, and everyone's input was always welcome.
Can you remember who else was included in that advisory committee?
Oh gosh, we had representatives of higher education, the tax department, the budget department, highways, tax. It was 16, I think it was 16 members.
Okay. You mentioned earlier, what was the discussion about? Was there money saved, millions saved, the millions to implement? There's nobody here from the people that do the programming and the software to do all this, and I think that that's really where one of the flies in the ointment is. I know it is for me because we've spent, how much, you said millions earlier.
Oh, yes.
Give me a number on those millions. How much have we spent?
It is estimated, the 10-year cost, I'm gonna give you a 10-year number, and this is, we're in year 5. The 10-year number of the cost of implementation was $179.5 million. Now, prior to the development of the contract and the contract going on the street, we did a benchmarking study which benchmarked our business processes, our business practices to our peers across the country, other government entities. We didn't score so well. We then hired, at that time, a company by the name of Savaggio and Teal that was commissioned to come in and do a business case on the cost and the potential cost savings if we were to implement an enterprise-wide system. That was completed, and it was estimated that those savings could be in the neighborhood of in excess of $300 million.
How much did you pay them to do this?
Oh, that original study was, I can get you that number, Senator. I wished I had it on the top of my head. I'm not
Less than
sure.
$1 million, more than $1 million.
Oh, I think for the business case, it would have been less than $1 million.
Okay.
Yeah, and so, after that business case was done, then the decision was made to develop the RFP and go on the street and solicit bids for this work. That RFP had over 13,000 requirements in it. We received 5 bids back, ranging from a high bid of $170 million to a low bid of about $99 million. At the end of the day, we ended up with and narrowed that list of 5 respondents down to 3. At the end of the day, the contract for the services, I think as of today, the contract with CGI, which is the primary contractor, which also pays for Kronos and all the other ancillary contracts that are part of the overall project, is about $124.5 million. We also still have a contract with what would have been Savaggio and Teal. They were acquired as now ISG. I think their 10-year number is about $12.5 million. The remaining costs are state resources, state employees, state costs of operating the system. But the intent was, and the intention is, and we believe that, is when we get to this 10-year horizon, we do a benchmark, and did we save the money that they told us we were going to save? And that we won't know that until we get to that 10-year mark.
Okay. And did I understand it right that you had $8 million in errors a year in the old system?
That's what we did that estimate, much like Aaron did his analysis. That's the analysis that we have done based on the semi-monthly system. And I want to make one clarification here too. We are operating in the EPICS platform for the semi-monthly folks. That was a system that I implemented back in the late 90s. It was a stopgap system to get us through Y2K. We invested less than $1 million in that system. That system was scheduled to have been retired 2 years ago. That system is, and I'll be quite honest with you, I do not sleep every night afraid that if that system crashes, we cannot recover it. It is outlived its lifespan. It cost my budget an additional $1 million last year to keep it operating this year that I did not have budgeted. It will cost me another $1 million next year with this legislation to keep that system up. It is fragile. Quite honestly, there is one, the company that we bought the software from is out of business. There's one programmer left that understands the base programming of that system.
What is the base program?
I want to say it was probably COBOL, but I'm not positive. But as far as understanding that was part of the development of that system, there's one left. We have him under contract. Something happening to him, we could be in serious trouble on the Epic system. Like I said, we were expecting to be off that system today.
And why are we on it when we have the other software?
Well, and that's part of the conversion. You know, we converted Wave 1. We were scheduled to convert Wave 2 before the end of last year, and we would have been off of Epics. Everyone would have been on the Oasis system. The concern came about whether or not we should include the decimal point. And like I said, there are a couple states that include decimal points. Most of the states don't, but that's, you know, we're prepared to deal with the decimal point if that's the direction that is asked us to go through. But, you know, we were planning to have all employees on Oasis, and keep in mind, in an enterprise system, everything is integrated from the budget to time and attendance, which I might say before Oasis, we did not have a standardized time and attendance system in state government. So all those systems are tightly integrated together. So when we go and make one change, even though to Kronos it may be a flipping in their software to calculate on bi-monthly or bi-monthly as opposed to bi-weekly, we have to test and make changes across all the body of software, not just the Kronos piece. That's yet just the front end piece. We have the Advantage software, which is the main engine behind the HR payroll system and the financials. It affects everything. And that's why we estimate that cost to be somewhere between $7.5 and $10 million, because we can't make a change without testing it and making sure that it is not creating other undue consequences within the accounting system. And it is like I said, there's literally been thousands of hours of testing in this system.
Okay, and you talked about the rollback. If we roll back and we passed this legislation, rolled it back and made all the employees happy, because to a greater degree, I believe that that's exactly what would happen on this. What's the cost of that? You said millions earlier.
Yeah, we estimate that to between $7.5 and $10 million is what the board provided. You know, I would say this. I think and I've done my own informal studies, I think employees that are still on the semi-monthly are scared of bi-weekly and the conversion to it. I think if you were to bring employees that are being paid under the bi-weekly system, they will overwhelmingly tell you they want paid bi-weekly. There was a grievance, and that's what started part of this. And during that grievance process, one of the grievance told me, please don't take bi-weekly. I do not want this to cause bi-weekly pay to go away. We love bi-weekly pay. The grievance is not about bi-weekly pay. The grievance was about calculation. And I'll say one other thing, if I can, on the hourly rate, and that's somewhat been talked about. The hourly rate, and when we struck, and that's one thing about an enterprise-wide system in the bi-weekly, we treat everyone, for the most part, everybody is paid, and their salary is divided out so that you're paying them for every hour that they work. And the way that we struck that hourly rate was the exact same way we struck the hourly rate in Epics. When we had separation of employees and we had to pay out the unused annual leave, we had to strike an hourly rate. That hourly rate struck in Epics is the exact same way we struck the hourly rate in Oasis. The same calculation was performed. That's how we arrived at the hourly rate. Precedent had been long set that when you're converting a salaried employee and paying them out, because you've got to pay them out an hourly because they earn this annual leave, that's how that hourly rate was struck. We used the same formula.
Okay. Well, it boggles my mind that the rollback cost is what it is, and it's about, from what I can gather here, about a 1/12 of what it costs for the system. And To go back to doing what we were before, that seems an exorbitant number. Actually, the system that you've been operating on since 1992 was $1 million, and we're looking at $124 million, and they can't even simply do something that QuickBooks does for a business like mine.
Yeah.
And all the other ones that are out here that are in business, why are we choking on our own vomit, for lack of a better term, on being able to implement something, but it's costing the taxpayers tens of millions of dollars?
Absolutely, and I'm not disagreeing with you. I do point back to one thing. If we could operate on QuickBooks, that would be wonderful. We cannot.
I get that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we do operate in an extremely complex payroll system. And I would offer as being the one, and that's why I was disappointed in the physical note. I'm the one that processes payroll. I process your payroll. I process the governor's payroll. I process payroll for hire. I process the Supreme Court's payroll. I am the one under the Constitution, the only one that can perform that function. I'm the only one that understands the true cost, and I was not asked. That's a side note. But, you know, with the system, the only people that are going to be happy are the integrators, because they're going to make more money. I don't want to pay them more money. I want to bring the system up the way it was designed. Now, we can debate, we should have stayed with semi-monthly. That's what we wanted to do to begin with, but the steering committee came back and the business case said we needed to be bi-weekly. And we can debate that and debate that and debate that. Like I said, I use Ohio as an example. They pay bi-weekly. They understand that you have the extra day, and Aaron is absolutely right. There are 200, you know, when you look at 52 weeks, 5 work days a week, 250 days. But the way the calendar falls, there's many times there's 251 work days or 252 work days in a year. Or there's 1,080 work hours. And so as a result, you have those extra days. How do you handle those days? We can do one of two things when you move to biweekly. You strike the hourly rate, as we struck the hourly rate, the way that our consultants told us this is the way you strike the hourly rates, the way that we always struck the hourly rate in accordance with FLSA. You strike that hourly rate and you pay them for those days when they roll around. That's what Ohio does. Ohio pays their employees salaried and stuff. Now, the only ones that don't get that, I didn't get it, and I just want to point out one other thing. I was talking about the governor's salary. It wasn't that we were going to overpay the governor. They were afraid we were going to underpay the governor. And so we had to, and we built that into the system to correct statutory and salaried employees that have a salary set by statute.
So did it cost $200,000 to figure out how to pay the governor $175,000, whatever it is he gets paid?
That was a stub manual adjustment that we had to make for that. The decimal point was the other issue, and that's an issue that programmatically we have made to the system. We're still testing that, and that testing is still going on. That excuse me, it's our hope to have that flexibility will work in the system. But at the end of the day, and I don't know how to impress upon you the work that's been going on and the tight integration of this entire system over the course of the last 3 years. That's the work that part of that work has to be redone, because we're making a change within the software, and in a tightly integrated system, a single change could have repercussions throughout the entire body of the system. And you have to test that. If not, we could be paying employees wrong. That's why if we make this change, it's going to cost us money. Not only do we have to make the programmatic changes, but then we have to go back and retest. And that's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours to retest before we can put it into production. It would be foolish of us to make a change and put it into production without being tested. We just can't do that. That's my bigger concern. My concern is if you pass this legislation, the way it's written, it's from passage. I'll be honest with you, it can't be done from passage. It cannot be done.
Okay, Senator from the 8th, you have questions? From
Yes, sir,
the
thank
auditor?
you. Thank you, Auditor. This is way past me, I don't know, but are people in the state, do we have salaried people? Do we have hourly people? Have all the above, right?
Oh, yeah. And, you know, our payroll system, we have, I use highways workers.
Yeah.
They were on a bulldozer, they get 1 hourly rate. Then an hour later, they operate an excavator, they get another hourly rate.
Yeah.
Our system has to handle that. We have correction officers, shift differentials, we have physicians, we have nurses, we pay virtually every professional classification you can think of. They all have different pay rules, different pay codes, and our system has to handle all of that. We have contract employees, and that's why it's so complex. And when you make these changes, you have to go back and test it throughout the entire system because it is so complex. And I'm sorry, I'm probably not doing a good job of explaining it.
You're doing fine. This is a little bit off the subject, but then I'll get to the last question. Did I hear you say we pay for unused annual leave?
Yes.
Is that statewide?
Yes. When employees separate employment, they can do one of two things. They can take that the annual leave and they can freeze it, or they can be paid out. They can just be paid out accordingly every month. They can take it in a lump sum. They can freeze it so they can utilize it for additional service time whenever they choose to retire. Some retirees take their annual leave and apply it for additional service time to increase their retirement or their work years. But most employees take that as a lump sum payout, and they're paid those unused annual leave hours on an hourly basis, and they're paid that out.
Unlimited.
No, there is a cap of 300 hours. 300 hours, correct? Am I right? Or it's set by agency. I think the average is about 300 hours.
Last question. You said in 10 years, over 10 years, you hope to save $300 million. How are you going to determine that? What's the criteria? What will you add up to determine if you've saved?
And that's why we hired a professional to come in, and we did two things. We benchmarked. We hired a company, and I can't remember the name of the company that came in and did the benchmarking. They came in and benchmarked us and our business processes and our systems against the other states in the universe. And then the business case was done. And that's where those numbers came from. Now, we can argue whether or not they did a good job on that. Like I said, we take it at face value that this was a business case. I mean, we did not run into this lightly. We wanted to understand what the true costs were going to be and what the true savings were going to be. And that's why we did a business case.
I mean, do you just rely on what somebody tells you, or will there be a measure?
Well, yeah, and that's what I'm saying. After you reach that first 10 years of operation, I think then it would be incumbent upon the ERP board. I will not be there, but it'd be incumbent upon that board to go out, hire another independent consultant, be a KPMG, whoever you want to hire, have them come in, redo the business case, and did it hold water? Did we save what we were told and led to believe that we were going to save? Was it in the state's best financial interest? That's the only way you're going to ever validate whether we saved the money that they told us we would save by going down this road.
What would those items be? Less IT costs, less number of staff to handle them?
Number of staff, fewer errors, standardization of business processes. And that's where a lot of savings is standardizing your business processes so agencies are processing everything the same way. I'll be quite honest with you, there were over 100, well, I call them shadow systems that were retired, where agencies were holding and operating. Some of them were doing it in an Excel spreadsheet. Some of them were doing it in different programs that they had IS&C, right, where they were doing separate calculations for them to help them manage their money. What we did is we built a system that met the needs of all the users so that everyone was operating, so that if I worked for highways and accounts payable, I could easily go to work in another state agency and the system's going to operate the exact same way. In the old days, it did not.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator from Raleigh.
You may have said this, but the maintenance contract on Oasis, yearly maintenance contract, can you tell me what that is?
I may have that sheet with me. It's a sliding scale. Let me see. Maintenance. questions. This is just like, it looks like maintenance is going to, once we're fully implemented, it looks like maintenance is somewhere around $4.5 million a year.
4.5. But ramping up to that, it's more currently. Yeah.
What we have and what the plan and the original vision of the board was is, once we got the system completely stood up, stable, that within 3 years of that, we then would go and as part of our maintenance would be upgrades and keeping our system current.
Yeah.
And so we would go through those, and that's why we went down this road, so that we would always have a system that was current or state-of-the-art as we move forward. And that's part of what the maintenance.
So the OASIS system, is it utilized in any other states besides West Virginia?
Oh, yes.
When it comes to payroll
Yeah.
and all integration?
Yeah. Well, CGI is in the process, or has in, at the time we went to bid, the state of Alaska had just hired CGI to implement their ERP system. We then purchased CGI. Colorado, Alabama, Michigan, am I missing this? Arizona have all bought the same software package that we bought since we purchased it. Of the last 7 states to implement an ERP system, 6 chose the product that we implemented here in West Virginia.
Okay, thank you.
Senator from the 8th again.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I forgot one question. Have there been change orders to this contract with CGI?
Unfortunately, yes.
And what have they total?
The change orders, about $21 million. More than what I would like. I know it's more than what the governor would like. I'll be quite honest with you. We built a contingency in the contract. We were at that contingency. Any additional costs that we get would cause us to go over what we initially budgeted this project to cost. You never want change orders. It's like building a house. So if you've ever built a house, unfortunately, there's unforeseen things that come up along the way, and it is part of the process. We have done everything we can to keep that change order level and number down as small as we possibly can. Time will tell whether we did a good job on that, but it is something that none of us are happy with, but it's just a factor when you put in a large system like this.
Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none,
Thank you.
are there further questions of any of the other presenters? If I may have the liberty, I'd like to bring Mr. Canterbury back up again. Since the Chief Justice sent out a letter today, and you've listened now following the auditor and what's going on, his perspective, his opinions, is there anything that you would like to add or contradict or clarify? Choose any adjective that you want to.
I will not have any editorial edification, Mr. Chairman. That's another term. You asked for one. I heard both what the auditor said and what Mr. Allred said. I don't think the court would have changed any of their minds based on this. We feel that there are a number of issues. The whole annual issue has just never been addressed very clean and very clearly. We have a whole lot of people paid annually. We have a very small payroll processing group for our 1,400 employees. We have 4 or 5 people who do it. It's just a lot more work to use the new system. They're having to enter stuff into Epics and I guess OASIS to kind of make it current. As I said, I just think that one of the senators said, I think it was Senator Mullins, when a person gets paid a certain amount a year, that's what they expect to see at the end of the year. And this system doesn't seem to really make that happen. Some years you're going to get less, perhaps a few years down the road you'll get more. But certitude has to be important. And I guess if people retire in the next couple of years, this 36 months, again, it's not in weeks, it's in months, It's going to mean that people are going to get a little less in retirement. If they wait several years, they may get a little more in retirement. I would hope that certitude would matter, that you have to have certitude about such things. I certainly like certitude in my personal budget. I think that I demand it from my employees at the court. I would think that the state would want certitude. This doesn't seem to give us that. And I agree, this has been an amazing enterprise to put everything together. I've been involved with the UJA for the last 10 years. It'll be done in June, I'm happy to say. That's the Unified Judicial Application System for the magistrates. I don't mean to speak in acronyms. We issue change orders too. We're happy we didn't have many, none that cost much. The fact is that I don't think there's necessarily anybody at the court trying to find fault. We just happen to believe what this bill says. That's it.
Thank you. Any other questions for Senator from Raleigh?
When you first spoke earlier, you spoke of several payroll clerks having issues with the system.
Yes.
And you just mentioned that again. When you say several, have you talked to several different departments that have had issues with the system, having to enter stuff in twice instead of it being an hour or 2 hours to do payroll? Now it's an 8-hour ordeal because of the system.
I have not. However, they have their own world apparently, and they talk to each other. And so I have had my payroll people say, indeed, that others are facing the same kind of slower input. Some of that's just they ask for a lot more. Some of it is that it just takes a long time to get these screens to come up and then to make the next screen come up, and there's a lot of calls apparently going to their help desk at the auditor's office. They're pretty helpful, but it does take more time. But they've been trying to measure it out to be fair, because basically they're getting ready to ask the court to hire them somebody else, I think. Sure. That's why they've been measuring it so closely. Sure. And it takes about 2 hours on Epics. It takes about 8 hours with Oasis. And these are the typical changes that you have, somebody changes the way they want their insurance to be. Somebody changes something about their deductible. All the basic stuff that happens, the withholding. And, people have kids, and, it's just, all that stuff changes. And so it's just the usual working of having 1,400 some employees that you have to kind of take care of.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman Blair.
Okay. We are in the discussion phase. Anybody have any comments? Senator from Jefferson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I try to, being a chemist, I try to consider myself to be fairly technical, detailed oriented, but in the last hour or so, because of the sheer weight and magnitude of this, and I know that we're well into the system. I know our payroll clerks have been from the Senate in training for long months and et cetera. And that's about the only glimpse of watching people be trained on all this system. It was an extremely big step that was very much needed to go to a whole new computer system, and we're partially in that. I have serious reservations about making this mid-course change, and I'm not sure what we want to do with the bill, but I'm just want the committee to know that voting this up or down, or making the change, voting it up, I think that the changes may be very serious, monetary and so forth, where we've been staying the course. At least let this thing play out. I don't know the extreme hurry to do this right now, because I don't feel that I have a complete grasp in the 1 hour we've been talking about it, the ramifications of this, but clearly the auditor, this is his bailiwick. He's a constitutional officer that deals most closely with payroll and accounts and so forth, and I think I'm hearing him say, don't do this. In fact, it was, please don't do this. So I'll leave it up to the rest of the committee, maybe leave this bill on the table, or we have options. This is a single reference bill, so unless we ask it to go to finance or something, but I've realized the sheer gravity of what we're discussing here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Further comments? Seeing none, I'm going to do something that's rare. Since I am the lead sponsor, I'm going to make a few comments. And I try to avoid doing this. And no disrespect to the auditor on where we're at, because I try to be good to things. Around here, what happens is sometimes we get married to an issue. And before you know it, you're so emotionally attached to it, you can't give it up. And I've listened here today, and it bothers me greatly, immensely, that we've spent millions, $124 million, and then $20 million in change orders, and something as simple as what we're talking about here, from going from one type of pay cycle to another. And we're talking about being integrated. Well, in business, there's another thing that we do. When we make a mistake, we stop it. If we're making a mistake, we stop dead in our tracks, we back up and figure out how to solve the problem. We don't continue to throw money at it. And I hear right now that we're going to continue to be throwing more money at it. Now, if we pass this piece of legislation out of here today, it's not the end of the line. This thing's got to pass through the chamber and then go on over to the House side. We all know it's late in the game, but it might send a clear message, at least to the people that are writing the change orders out here and actually charging $10 million for simple software. It might drive it down to $1 million or less. We don't know that, but we know one thing for certain: it's costing too much for something that we were counting on. Driving the price, doing things more efficient in government, and it is not. It is not. And for the Supreme Court to send a letter out today on that was shocking to me. I didn't see that aspect of it. But I believe right now that it do the citizens of West Virginia, our employees as well, a world of good if we went ahead and voted this out and moved it on down through the process. And let's see what happens as it's moving through the process. One of the things that the auditor did say, and that is, if this bill passes as it stands right now, that they wouldn't be able to roll it back. And that troubles me as well. But we can take care of that, and I'll look into that. But I don't think we have time enough right now in the process to do anything other than, I would encourage a yes vote and move us through the system, and we'll get to addressing that little nuance of a problem from there, because that fix will not cost $10 million. It will not even cost $10,000. We'll do that job pretty quickly and swiftly to be able to address it. So I'm done. Feel a little better too. Recognize the Vice Chair for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to agree to the committee substitute.
Yeah, I've lost my place. The question is on agreeing to the committee substitute. All those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. No. In the opinion of the chairs, the ayes have it, and I declare the motion adopted. The committee substitute is agreed to. The chair recognizes the senator from Putnam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the committee substitute for Senate Bill 617 be reported to the full Senate recommendation that do pass.
The question is on the motion that the committee substitute be reported to the full Senate with a recommendation that do pass. All those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. No. In the opinion of the chairs, the ayes have it, and I declare the motion adopted, and the committee substitute for Senate Bill 617 will be reported.